I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd find herself in this situation. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had my life perfectly figured out. I'd been married to David for 3 years, a successful architect with kind eyes and a stable life. When we got married, his son Marcus was away at college, so our home was just the two of us. Quiet, predictable, safe. Then Marcus graduated and moved back home. I'd met Marcus a handful of times before, holidays, brief visits, but I'd never really known him. He was just David's son, a polite young man with his father's dark hair and a quiet demeanor that made him easy to overlook. When David told me Marcus would be staying with us while he looked for a job and saved up for his own place, I thought nothing of it. I welcomed the idea, actually. I figured it would bring our family closer together. I had no idea how right I'd be. Marcus moved in on a Saturday in late spring. He was 24 now, no longer the lanky teenager from the wedding photos. He'd filled out broad shoulders, confident posture, a jawline that could have been carved from stone. When he hugged me at the door, I felt the solidness of him, and something stirred in me that I immediately pushed down. "He's your stepson," I reminded myself. "Don't be ridiculous." The first few weeks were completely normal. Marcus was respectful, helpful around the house, and surprisingly good company. He joined David and me for dinner, sharing stories about college and his plans for the future. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. David worked long hours, often leaving early and coming home late, so it was usually just Marcus and me in the evenings. That's when things started to shift. It began with small things, the way Marcus would hold my gaze just a second too long when we talked, how he'd find excuses to be in whatever room I was in, helping me cook dinner, asking about the book I was reading, offering to fix things around the house that weren't even broken. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was projecting something that wasn't there. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. David had texted saying he'd be working until at least midnight on a project deadline. I'd finished cleaning up after dinner and decided to head upstairs early with a glass of wine and the novel I'd been trying to finish for weeks. My routine was always the same: shower, change into comfortable pajamas, and read in bed until I got sleepy. Our upstairs hallway is long and narrow, with my and David's bedroom at one end and Marcus's room at the other, with a guest room and bathroom in between. Usually Marcus kept his door closed. He was a private person, respectful of boundaries. But that night, as I walked down the hallway in my silk pajama shorts and tank top, I noticed his door was open. Not just cracked, fully open. I should have just walked past. I should have gone straight to my room and minded my own business. But I didn't. As I approached, I heard music playing softly, something with a slow, deep bass that seemed to pulse through the walls. And then I saw him. Marcus was doing push-ups in the middle of his room, shirtless, his back muscles flexing with each controlled movement. The lamplight cast shadows across his skin, highlighting every curve and contour of his body. His gym shorts hung low on his hips, and there was a light sheen of sweat covering him. I froze. I knew I should move, knew I should walk away, but my feet wouldn't cooperate. I stood there in the hallway, wine glass in hand, watching him, counting his reps without meaning to. 23, 24, 25. He must have sensed me there, because suddenly he stopped mid-push-up and turned his head. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The air between us felt electric, charged with something I couldn't name and didn't want to acknowledge. "Sarah," he said, his voice slightly breathless. He stood up slowly, reaching for a towel on his bed and wiping his face. "I didn't hear you come upstairs," I said, "but I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting." He took a step closer to the doorway, and I became acutely aware of how little I was wearing. The silk pajamas that had always felt perfectly modest suddenly felt far too revealing. Couldn't sleep? David's working late. I said, but then immediately wondered why I'd offered that information, why it felt important for him to know I'd be alone. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes moving from my face down to the wine glass in my hand, then back up again. Those long nights must get lonely. There was something in the way he said it, something that made my pulse quicken. I'm used to it, I replied, but even I could hear how hollow that sounded. Are you? He leaned against the doorframe now, his arms crossed over his bare chest. The hallway suddenly felt very narrow, very warm. You deserve better than getting used to being alone, Sarah. The way he said my name, not Mom, never Mom, always Sarah, sent a shiver down my spine. Marcus, I started, but I didn't know how to finish that sentence. I see you, you know? I see how hard you try to make everyone comfortable, how you light up the whole house just by being in it, how lonely you look sometimes when no one's watching. My breath caught in my throat. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because it's true? Because you feel it too? Because you're my stepson, I whispered, but the words felt flimsy, like they were barely holding up under the weight of what was happening between us. I'm a grown man, and you're a woman who deserves to be seen, to be wanted, to be... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The silence stretched between us heavy and thick. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to walk away, to go to my room, to pretend this conversation never happened. But my body wouldn't move. I was trapped in his gaze, in the intensity of this moment that felt both terrifying and inevitable. This can't happen, I finally said, my voice barely audible. I know, but he didn't move away. Neither did I. We stood there in that hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The music from his room continued its slow, steady beat. My wine glass trembled slightly in my hand. Then somewhere deep in the house, I heard the garage door opening. David was home. The spell broke instantly. Marcus stepped back into his room, and I practically fled to my bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, trying to understand what just happened. Nothing had happened. Not really. We just talked. That was all. But it didn't feel like nothing. I heard David's footsteps on the stairs, his familiar heavy tread. He knocked softly before opening our bedroom door, his tie already loosened, his eyes tired. Hey, honey, you still awake? Just reading, I said, holding up my book as evidence, even though I hadn't turned a single page. He kissed my forehead, told me about his day, and headed to the shower. I lay there in bed, listening to the water run, trying to focus on my book, trying to ignore the fact that just down the hall, Marcus was in his room, probably still shirtless, probably thinking about our conversation just like I was. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus in that doorway, heard his voice saying, "I see you," felt the pull between us that I knew was dangerous. The next morning at breakfast, everything seemed normal. Marcus was polite and distant, barely making eye contact. David chattered about a new project at work. I made coffee and toast and pretended my hands weren't shaking. But I knew something had shifted. A line had been crossed, maybe not physically, but emotionally, and I had no idea how to uncross it. Over the following days, I found myself hyper-aware of Marcus's presence in the house. I'd catch myself listening for his footsteps, noticing when he left and when he returned. I started closing my bedroom door more carefully, dressing more conservatively, avoiding being alone with him, but the tension only grew. Sometimes I'd find him watching me across the dinner table. Other times I'd turn around in the kitchen and he'd be there, close enough to touch. Neither of us mentioned that night in the hallway, but it hung between us like a secret we both carried. David noticed nothing. He was too wrapped up in his work, too trusting, too secure in his perfect life to see what was building right under his roof. And that's what scared me most. Not that something might happen between Marcus and me, but that part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, wanted it to happen. I don't know how this story ends. Marcus is still living here, still finding ways to be near me, still looking at me with those eyes that seem to see straight through every wall I've built. David still works late most nights, and I still walk past Marcus's bedroom door, my heart racing every single time, hoping it's closed, but also hoping in some dark corner of my heart that it's open. Because the truth is, I couldn't look away that night, and I'm terrified that if given the chance, I wouldn't be able to look away again. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Want to know what happens next? The full novel, The Open Door, a forbidden love story, will be available on Amazon soon. Follow Sarah's complete journey as she navigates desire, loyalty, and the impossible choices that will change her life forever. This is just the beginning of a story that will keep you turning pages late into the night. Coming soon to Amazon Kindle.